So thank you guys thank you all for coming. You know, it's always a great pleasure. So my name is John Greer. This is the Impact Investing panel. You know, every year when I come, it's always, you know, we continue to be amazed at the number and the quality of the companies that are present here at RESI, and our compliments to them for how they recruit the number of companies and how well they manage it. It's a very hectic time. So, you know, I think they do a wonderful job. From our standpoint, you know, particularly excited, I think, about the panel. I think we've got a really impressive panel. We've got 4 of us here now, and then we'll be a 5th soon. But just in the interest of moving forward, I thought we'd thank you guys for coming. You know, I think all of our impact investors on the panel, while we each have different interests, you know, in terms of specific disease states or particular geography or whatever, I do think we have one common goal in terms of impact, and that is to genuinely try to benefit patients as best we possibly can, in addition to getting a reasonable financial return for our investors. So we're thankful for you guys coming, and that's kind of what we'll talk. Before I introduce each member of the panel, just as a little time filler here, you know, impact investing can mean different things to different people. And, you know, I think it's always a good lesson to remember. I think that it's important to ask the right question. You know, whether it's in fundraising or whether it's in, you know, how you define impact or a variety of things. And I'm reminded of the story about a man who was sitting in a chair in a lobby of a hotel. And on the floor next to him was a dog. And there was a person that came up to him, as a passerby, came up and said, he noticed the man, he noticed the dog, and said, "It's a really cute dog, does your dog bite?" And the man who was in the chair engrossed in his newspaper said, "No." So then the passerby came down and reached out to the dog, and lo and behold, the dog bit him. And he looked at the guy and said, "I thought you said your dog doesn't bite." And he said, "That's not my dog." So with that as a bit of an introduction, rather than wait too much longer, we probably ought to get started. So what I guess I'd like to do would be to ask each member of the panel just to give a brief introduction of their personal background, and we'll start into the panel. The real purpose of the panel today is to address 2 key points. One is what's going on in the world of impact investing, and what is impact investing, how do each one of us view it differently. And then secondly, what advice can we provide to companies that are seeking funding from impact investors? Are we different than regular investors? Probably don't look too much different. Do we operate differently? And to try to give some insight in terms of what might be helpful for people who might be trying to raise funds from impact investors. So with that, why don't I ask each one of the panel members? We've got 3 of them here. I can provide mine as well. But why don't we start with Jim O'Neill, who's to my immediate left. Jim, if you could give a little background.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I run SENS Research Foundation, which is a nonprofit down in Mountain View that works to identify and then reverse the cellular and molecular precursors of all the diseases of aging. And when we get an idea to a certain stage, we spin it out into a for-profit company. Back in the Bush administration, I helped run the Department of Health and Human Services, which, as you all know, includes NIH, FDA, CDC, and CMS. After that, I ran Peter Thiel's foundation, and while I was there, we created 2 institutions that also spin out impact companies. The first was the Thiel Fellowship, and the second was Breakout Labs. Both of those have helped spin out companies in the impact space, such as Freenome, which was started by a Thiel Fellow, which is a blood biopsy company, Modern Meadow, which is a clean meat and leather company, Immusoft, which is a cellular reprogramming company, 3Scan, which is digital pathology, and many others, some of which I'm sure we'll talk about more.
Thank you, Jim. Michael?
So Michael Cole, my personal specific history. So I started as a clinical neuropsychologist. I got trained up as a clinical And so from the training, with doing those focus areas, what I've gone into, started primarily academic, doing clinical work in academic settings, University of Hawaii, UC Davis, Department of Neurology, UC Berkeley. But increasingly I got more and more involved with biotech, especially early stage, where that's predominantly what I'm working with right now, and then also working with the Impact Fund, that I'll tell a little bit more about shortly, Global Neuromod Ventures, that sprung out of what we saw as a significant need for funding at earlier stages for companies that are addressing psychiatric, neurological patient populations.
Thank you, Mark. And we'd like to welcome Grace Matthew. Grace has actually come probably the furthest of any of us, coming from Australia over the weekend, so welcome. We sincerely hope that the fires start to kind of subside in Grace, so we wish you well. Thank you for coming. I know sometimes the elevators can be more challenging than the transcontinental flight, so thank you for coming. We're just starting to give kind of the introductory backgrounds for us, so if you could give your background.
Sure. Yes, apologies for walking in late. I was on another panel, and then the elevators have probably more stops than my flight from Sydney to here. My name is Grace Matthew, Managing Director of Stetson Family Office, and I came to join the Family Office a couple of years ago. I actually came from an impact background, so both on the philanthropy side and also on the sort of impact investment side. And so I joined the Family Office and now have kind of an oversight in terms of advising on the strategy around some of our investments, and then also the two foundations that we run in multiple locations around the world. So my focus has been recently on the Asia Pacific region. Education-wise, I'm not in the biospace, so I'm not a medical professional. My education was around business and government and political relations. But I find myself in an area which is very fascinating, and I've always had a passion for impact. And as it happens, our investment strategy has moved from being quite, sort of widely focused to narrowing the focus into the life sciences space, with a specific focus around devices and certain sort of medtech technologies. So that's where we are. And Stetson Family Office is, along with, we're sort of marrying our philanthropy and our investments by helping to bring together family offices with angel investors who are interested in kind of adding to the continuum of capital where there are dropout moments which lead to the valley of death. And so we're doing what we can to bring other investors on board and invite them into the life science space so that they can have an impact through their investments and through their philanthropy.
Thank you. And Anthony, you were speaking?
Sure. Hi, Anthony Majoris. I'm the Managing Director of the Cancer Fund, and I think I resemble Grace's last comment. I've been an angel investor for about 20 years. Like you, I don't have a background in medicine or science. I do have a background in technology. I've been an entrepreneur for about 25 years, built and sold a few modest small companies. But I have a considerable amount of investing experience over the past 8 years. I've really committed myself to health innovation and focus on that. Over the past 3 to 5 years or so, having worked with a number of early stage companies, you start to see that pattern, right? Where the real problem that everybody seems to be having is the capital. And that's the problem that I was really trying to focus on helping them address. And sounds similar to the Stetson experience, realizing that I couldn't boil the ocean, and I do have a lot of interests, including mental health and a number of others. Chose to focus on cancer a few years ago. Also have experience managing another early stage health innovation fund, which helped give me some access to some of the early deal flow that we've been looking at. Relative to everyone else up here, I assume you guys have been all doing this for some time. We're fairly new. We've been working on this for the past several years, and we've noticed that there's a slight difference between my badge and how I present myself. Some of that is actually rebranding and restructuring from some of the lessons that I've learned over the past couple of years in exploring this. But this really grew out of my own personal investment strategy, and so the past couple of years have been sort of evolving this into engaging broader interests from other investors that might be like-minded, and also exploring what kind of deal flow there is out there. One of the initial questions was whether there would be enough deal flow to actually support our fund model, particularly given that we're in Phoenix, Arizona, which is the venture capital of the world. Right?
That's right. Great. Thank you. So brief background on John Reary as well. So I'm grateful to be here at the Brain Trust Accelerator Fund since 2006. It's a impact investing fund. Before the term was impact investing. We started almost in the venture, classic venture area, but the purpose is to advance therapies for brain disease, hence Brain Trust. Brain disease across that chasm, the late preclinical into the early clinical stage, and then to look at promising therapies to address many of the neurodegenerative diseases as well as some of the psychiatric diseases as well. We've done 7 companies over the last 14 years. We're grateful for having done that. Prior to that, I was fortunate to be a founder and CEO of a venture philanthropy called Accelerate Brain Cancer Cure. So I actually had the good fortune of working with a number of great researchers and clinicians to advance therapies for brain cancer. Did that for about 5 years. That's when it was venture philanthropy. And Lucy and the others had asked me a couple of years ago to come here and to be able to manage a panel on venture philanthropy. Now that we're talking about impact investing, I think we're focusing on that second word. It's no longer venture philanthropy. We're talking about impact investing. And we want to make returns for our investors, and that's really what we're all about. Prior to that, I actually was in the venture industry, the last one for about 12 years, and had about 14 years operating experience in pharma and biotech. So a little bit of experience on mostly on the healthcare side, not as much probably on the finance side. So with that as an introduction, what I'd like to do, I think, since we are talking on an impact investing panel, and everyone has a slightly different catch on impact, what I'd like to do is ask each one of the panel members to talk about what is the impact feature of their particular fund, and how do they measure it? How do you know you're doing well at the end of the day? So Jim, I'll start with you.
Sure. So first of all, we're a nonprofit, so we don't have investors, we have donors. But our donors care about impact every bit as much as impact investors would. And so we measure it on things like what kind of scientific breakthroughs do we make, and then because we spin out companies to take our breakthroughs to market, we also measure in terms of the companies that we either generated or inspired. What was the rest of the question?
Just the overall impact of how you measure it. I think you covered both. So,
Great.
Michael, if we ask you to talk a little bit about neural health.
Absolutely. So I guess to answer the question in part, it's worth going to briefly how it's formed, and that really is what drives the impact that we see. So a lot of us have been doing work with early stage companies within this clinical neuroscience space, so looking at solutions for psychiatric disorders, neurological diseases, and saw that there's a real lack of funding. So you see some of the stats, even at JP out there that presented a lot of funding going into healthcare, a lot of funding going into the neurosciences. But if you look at the earlier stages, what we were seeing anecdotally was that there actually wasn't that much. These companies were doing incredible work, and they couldn't get funding. There weren't a lot of people investing in the space. And so we looked at that anecdotal experience in both Silicon Valley Bank and Facebook were extremely generous. They gave us the last 30 years of the data for this space. And in fact, over the last 3 to 5 years, there's been a pretty significant decrease in this area. And so that's really the impetus and the impact. So myself as still practicing clinician too, seeing the bandwidth constrict on some of these critical RESI, and that's a lot of the impetus behind forming the fund and having the impact focus. So in terms of the impact focus, our scope is really looking to address mental illnesses and brain disorders and companies that are doing innovative, impactful work with that. Also, broader than that, to any digital health, any healthcare services innovations that can help better treat those patient populations. So we take a very empirical approach to it. So how do we measure potential outcome, or on the front end measure the potential impact that a company would have? So we're interested in both impact and returns, and quite literally have kind of equal weighting to those in our algorithm, and take a very empirical approach. So the profitability of the company is just the traditional characteristics of the company that are looked at in terms of estimating their potential likelihood for profitability. So that's the metric from that end. The metric from the impact end, we've done a lot of work really trying to develop it. It's tough. Most of the things that are being developed within the time of the portfolio will not go to market necessarily. And so how do you measure the impact? And so we work with some folks within the venture impact field. We brought Jed Emerson on board as an advisor, and really have taken an extremely empirical approach to estimate what the impact from the front end investment, and then whether we're interested ultimately in re-upping. And so looking at a longitudinal too, which is tricky. And so just to highlight a few different components for that, looking at the impact, one of the key things is looking at World Health Organization metrics for disability for the disease states. And the higher the disability rating, the higher potential impact, assuming their innovation comes to fruition. Another aspect that goes kind of hand in hand with that is to what extent are there solutions, treatments, cures for that disease state. If there's a lot, then the potential impact for a new drug or treatment entering the field would be much less, obviously, because there's other things that are available. But if there's not, Alzheimer's, no cure for for instance, then the potential impact is much greater. We're also looking at just a couple last final points with it, social societal impact, so the social costs of these different disease states, whether it be work, cost of caregiving, things along those lines. So all told, with our algorithm that we look at, there's about 20 different metrics that we have differentially weighted based on kind of what our impact hypothesis thesis is, and we rate it in that way. And it's not only kind of cross-sectional on the front end, but then we can track companies longitudinally and see as their trajectory proceeds, does their potential impact increase or decrease.
That's great. Thank you, Mom. And Grace, when we hear from you.
So being a family office, we have quite a different approach. We definitely haven't formalized the process of impact investment to the extent that we have. So we more look for a qualitative impact, and when it comes to our, the investments that we are both enacting and facilitating in the medical space, we assess their qualitative impact, and we make sure that these, in some cases our investments have served underserved communities, help give them access to, better medical training or better doctors and medical professionals. And then in other cases, it's been, we've had a couple of therapeutics which have led to, meaningful changes in the lifespan of people who are facing terminal cancers. And so our way of assessing things is a lot more qualitative, and because we don't have, we're not sort of doing investments probably with the velocity that you are, we haven't needed to as yet create such a dynamic framework around that assessment piece. But yeah, so a lot of it comes down to sort of quality.
Thank you, Grace. And Anthony.
Sure. So, I was hoping I could just search on the internet and find. Yeah, I did. And I had mixed feelings about this, right? Because this is part of the adventure of where this is at. Is over time it became clear to me that first of all, there's no real consensus of the definition of impact investing and what it is, what it isn't. which is partly the exciting opportunity to define it. And along with that comes the metrics and how you measure these things. And there are some organizations that I thought had done some work, and I know they are doing work in this area, but I think they're sort of over such a broad area of impact that it didn't go as sort of deeper into the level of specificity that I felt like we needed, particularly around health, and then certainly not around cancer. And so, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. I thought it would make more sense if we were using somebody else's metrics. But for now, where we're heading is sort of defining our own metrics, which I really didn't want to do because it takes time, effort, and money. And we really anchor these around what I characterize as our cancer stakeholders group. Certainly, patients are our primary stakeholder that we're looking at. So certainly, we're looking at impact on patient outcomes, access to care, and cost of care. But they're not necessarily the only stakeholder that we look at. We also look at the caretakers that take care of the patients, right, and the health professionals. And certainly, or at times, we're even looking at the problem from another angle, which is payers and perhaps policymakers. We haven't gone as deep into that aspect. And so, part of what we're looking at is how do we develop a model that we can not only evaluate companies on when we're looking at them in terms of making an initial investment or follow-on investment, but how can we continue to track that over time and come back to our community of investors and say, look, this was the impact that we projected, and this is what we delivered on, right? And how can we do that in a way that is believable and actually accurate, or somewhat accurate, not just making numbers up. And I think we have it's a really important responsibility that we have to actually do that. So I think it's evolving. We haven't figured it all out. We've been testing some things. Because there's another fund that I'm managing now, at least some of the broader things that aren't necessarily cancer specific, we've been able to sort of retroactively apply to a fund that's about 10 years old, overlay it and see what that looks like. And I'd say it's not bad. I would call it maybe low resolution, right? And they're kind of big top line numbers, but maybe not the level of detail that I hope we'll get to someday.
I think that's a good observation. I can report back, we actually had our first fund that I had mentioned to you started in 2006. We closed it after about 10 years. And the three measures that we used for how do we know we were doing a good job. One was the financial rate of return. We were fortunate to be in the upper quartile rate of return for funds that were started of our size in 2006. Secondly, we created 5 companies, which otherwise probably would not have existed because the classic venture industry wouldn't create them, right? And these were opportunities on philanthropy and other things that were really source of data. So those 5 companies benefited potentially arguably up to 10 million patients. And then finally, the other aspect of our fund we've continued to do, and we're going to continue in the future, and we've tested it in the past. We give a portion of all the general partners' profits back to charity. And that is a generous contribution. It's called in our industry the carried interest, right? So it's the general partners' profits. We give a portion of that back to charity. It's not totally gratis. We ask those charities to give us access to their deal flow, promising in a kind of philanthropic projects that they've invested in. Give us an early lead on some of those opportunities, and also give us access to your advisors. We can't possibly have all the advisors in the world. Jim probably can. We probably can't have all the advisors in the world dealing with CNS disease. There are just too many different disparate diseases to have. So we rely on the charities to provide access to their advisors, so that helps us do the due diligence and help us make the investment, helps source deals. So that's a little bit of our experience. We're continuing to learn. As our first fund, as I said, we closed it a couple of years ago. We're on our second fund. We're about halfway through it. And we're hopefully be able to do the same thing in the second fund. But it's a challenging, but it's certainly a very worthwhile thing for us to be able to do. So with that, I'd like to just throw out some questions to the panel, and whoever wants to answer, they can answer. But questions that have come up historically is how is an impact investor different than a traditional investor? I mean, some people have said, you know, if you're an investor in healthcare, you're by definition an impact investor. You know, I mean, we're treating patients. So how are we different? Anyone want to take a little shot at that one?
I'll give like a very sort of general first answer, and then you guys can break it down. So I mean, there's always you know, different investors will put different sort of methods of screening their investments and making decisions about what kinds of things they're interested in and what kinds of things they aren't. So there's positive screening, there's negative screening. An impact investor may put sort of negative screens on certain things, so they won't invest in something that's going to cause people to die, or like, you know, coal or mining or something like that. But then there may also be a sort of positive aspect to it where they say, okay, we're going to specifically target things that are going to cause, you know, I mean, better patient outcomes, and, yeah, or what disease or whatever. And so that is part of how, I mean, it does come down to that question of how you also define impact. But then I think as well, in some cases, impact investors may be willing to sacrifice certain returns, you know, certain monetary returns, in order to know that they are actually creating social impact. And that's where I think having a, you know, probably more robust framework around measuring that than we do is helpful, because then it's easier to justify the sacrifice in those financial returns in order to, you know, see certain social impacts.
Anyone else want to comment?
So on the front end, when you're raising the capital, I think it may come down to whether or not somebody writes a check, right? Depending on the level of risk that they look, that may be one sort of indicator. But I can also tell you, I think that's the easy part. And I think there's probably a lot of people that will say things in the beginning of the relationship. But where I think you can really see the difference is over the long term. And I can tell you some of the horrific shareholder calls that I've been on where you really see the difference of who is an impact investor and who's investing purely for the return. How people make decisions, why they make them, how they behave. The true colors kind of come out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's in line with my thoughts too. In terms of it's still very much so budding. So it's very there's no clear kind of specific definition, and it's a fluid process. How, you know, over the next many years how this is going to emerge. I think it's got a lot of robust inertia behind it. I think as best I can tell, now it's going to grow tremendously. And I think that's really beneficial in terms of the definitional differences. At least from my take on that all healthcare firms are not impact by definition. I think there is a discernible difference in terms of the mission, and that translates in very tangible ways. Exactly what Anthony was saying in terms of I'll just use for example the way that Global Health Ventures is structured. I think it's probably similar to Lung Impact. What it boils down to is half of our weighting for our mission is on impact, and so at when considering companies in the companies that we're working with initially, currently now we're new funds still doing the raise and doing some special purpose vehicles. Initially, our mission really drives a lot of the interactions. So what we want to do is not get the very, very most out of the profitability, but that's a component of it. But we want to get the very most out of the innovation so that it can benefit patients. And so our disposition, the way that we work with companies is couching that. And I think that's an appreciable difference between more general healthcare VC firms and then those with an impact mission.
So even though I run a nonprofit, I think for-profit companies make a much larger positive difference on the world than nonprofits do. And I mean that not just in healthcare, but across industries, computing, telecom, agriculture, what have you. The greatest technology or intervention to alleviate global poverty in the past few decades is probably the mobile phone, as many others have said, and that is mostly a product of profit-seeking entities. In healthcare, there's a little bit different nuance, though, because even though, in a very broad sense, every healthcare company is trying to make human life better, there's an unfortunate market distortion that payers, insurers, regulators are willing to provide a lot more revenue for treatments than for cures. And so investors do sort of face a choice of whether to seek the maximum profit by providing a therapy that people have to take continuously versus a one-time cure. And it would be great if we could think of ways to reshape the market and correct that.
I might actually just jump in and definitely strongly agree with that point. Also the fact that, even better than a cure sometimes is preventing something. and making money from preventing something is a relatively novel thought for a lot of people. And so, our focus really has been risk reduction. And there are companies out there who are doing tremendous things in terms of, so Alzheimer's is one of our areas of focus. And if you delay Alzheimer's by 5 years, then you reduce the incidence by 50%. And so, pharmaceutical companies are spending billions and billions of dollars on all these trials that aren't working, and yet imagine if they had a pill that would reduce the incidence by 50%. I mean, they'd be making hundreds of billions of dollars. And yet we have that in the form of like lifestyle and, exercise and socializing and things like that. So there are, we've started looking at companies which are doing programs around reducing, risk reducing and preventing these kinds of things. And those companies are not always the ones which are going to become a unicorn or are going to, be making headlines or be acquired by a large pharmaceutical company. But we see that there is a very, very meaningful impact there. And there is also the ability to turn a profit. So I think we were talking about the idea of, the trade-offs that people make in their investment approach. And one of the trade-offs is you maybe trade off on a bottom line if you're prioritizing impact over financial return, but you also make a trade-off in terms of risk in some cases. And so certain impact investors may have a higher risk appetite than other investors. And as you mentioned as well, they may be willing to stick with the company which may otherwise start looking less feasible to stay with longer term.
That's perfect. In fact, Grace, that's a perfect segue into the second portion of our purpose of our panel here, which is to kind of give advice in terms of what the companies here might think of in terms of approaching impact investors, what our sweet spots are. What are the areas that we find particularly attractive? I think your suggestion of lifestyle modification is brilliant. It's one that's not often looked at from a venture standpoint, because it's not always a scalable model. And it does require individual motivation to achieve, but I think it's a perfect example. Maybe I could ask the rest of the panel members to give me an example of what they could see as being kind of an ideal investment from their standpoint going forward. I mean, you think about, is it diagnostic, is it therapeutic, is it service, what the therapeutic areas, is there a particular stage that's particularly attractive to you, are there any geographic restrictions or areas of focus? If you had to characterize what their ideal kind of investment, or at least the nexus of what the right opportunities would be for you, can you just summarize that for the companies?
So we're most interested in seed and in Series A, so preclinical, early clinical efficacy, and that's just based on what we were seeing and wanting to target with the funding deficit at that point that we were seeing with the Silicon Valley Bank and Pittsburgh data, where there's the biggest need. In terms of the specific areas of focus, therapeutics would be the vast majority. We're really looking for curative agents for the heavy hitter, extreme unmet medical needs like the dementias, Alzheimer's, things along those lines. And then also we're looking at devices, well, to a smaller extent. Digital health, we see a lot of very promising applications within the space of psychiatry and neurology, so that's an area that we're very excited about. And then the service industry too, smaller portion, but innovations that really, so the patient populations that we're most interested in, psychiatric, neurological, are typically very complex patient populations with a lot of comorbidities, and so any kind of service and innovations to help better manage them. In terms of geographic region, it's pretty wide open. We're looking primarily in North America, but definitely beyond as well.
Great, thanks. Anthony?
Sure. So we have three categories, sort of three themes, but it's going to sound like six. Prevention and management, diagnostics and monitoring, and prevention and enabling technologies. And like I mentioned, this grew out of my own personal investing thesis, to which I was very much attracted more toward prevention, like you had shared, and possibly cures. But it's interesting in sort of engaging a broader community of investors, and that's part of the shift in sort of our themes and recognizing that there is actually strong interest in therapies. And so we've tweaked our design a little bit to accommodate that. So just to clarify, we are a for-profit fund. So we invest from the pre-seed stage through Series A. I would say that a lot of what we're looking at is what I would characterize as kind of C+. But some of my favorite stuff, to be honest, is what I would characterize as the pre-seed investments in part, in some cases, because this changes the economics. There are actually a portfolio of companies that we're working on, which we sort of break our activity into two groups. One is the venture capital side, the other is venture creation, where we're literally forming the ventures, we're forming the innovation teams, and really working on the basis that what if an entrepreneur doesn't show up to solve some important problem, right? That capability. And the reason that I like those, even if we didn't initiate the venture, the problem, the market opportunity, is that there's an opportunity to really shape the solution, the business model, and the impact ultimately. And there are combinations of, I'll say, activity on the venture capital side where there are disparate businesses that we're looking at, where I'm looking at these and saying, well, if you piece these things together, if you weren't so myopically focused on the U.S. market, you literally could create a global cure that's $5 per treatment, right? I don't quite have the capital to pull that one off yet, but it's interesting to see those opportunities, and the earlier we get involved, the easier it is to kind of, I won't say like hijack the thing, but collaborate and guide. Those are my favorites.
Yeah, so currently we own stakes in companies that we ourselves have created. So, for example, our atherosclerosis team invented a new class of cyclodextrins that can eliminate subacute-cholesterol, which otherwise completely chokes macrophages, which is why they turn into foam cells. So we're developing a therapy that should be able to eliminate subacute-cholesterol and help the foam cells turn back into healthy macrophages. So we just spun that out into a for-profit company 6 weeks ago called Underdog. We also did research in breaking up glucosamine crosslinks, and we spun that out to a company called Rebel also last year. So we are thinking of expanding our scope. We're considering very strongly creating an incubator in the next 6 months, and then we'll be able to support a larger number of companies that we didn't support. But I can tell you what our focus would be pre-seed companies that are focusing on early stage interventions to expand the human health span and move towards making being 85 as vigorous as being 45.
Wonderful. I think we all enjoy that one. On brain trust, basically for us it's simple as we do brain-related disease, mostly therapeutic, a little bit diagnostic, mostly therapeutic. We do that translational stage, so it's preclinical into the clinic. I guess that's probably a Series A round. And we do focus primarily on the U.S., and that's basically our focus. I think before we start going to questions and answers, which is probably a good time, we want to hear from you guys, and that's part of the reason for being here, is to hear from you folks. I guess the one question I'd like to throw out to the panel, and I think I know the answer, is whether there is any difficulty in having a for-profit investor join you, and I realize whether a non-impact join an impact investor as you do a syndicate raising money for a particular company. I don't think that would pose a problem, but I just wanted to raise that question because clearly the interests of the two parties might be somewhat disparate in terms of the two funds that would be investing, one being impact and one being straight financial. Any opinions on that or thoughts?
Well, we actually have other investors who co-invest with us, and that includes some of our what we would define as impact investments. But we do look for a strong return. We do look for strong financial returns. We look for platform opportunities with strong, multiples, and also we look for strong co-investors. So I think that the potential for there to be, an initial meeting of minds, which later on leads to potential conflict of interest, is just sorted out by some very early discussions with clear expectations which are set, goals which are aligned, and that those are set up from the start. And then if there's a change in either party, that can be discussed later on. But theoretically, if the impact investors' interests are, aligned, then there shouldn't be that much of an issue.
So with that, unless anybody disagrees, why don't we hear from you folks? Does anybody have a question? Yes.
Hi, so wonderful to see impact investors here and focus in this area. My name is Sangeeta and I'm a founder of HelpSee, which focuses on cancer digital therapeutics. My question for you is this: how are your, are you looking at different milestones and deliverables from a company when you're coming in as an impact investor? So that's part one of the question, and part two is, do you lead or do you follow? Because again, that relates to the dynamics between the different investors.
So it's a cancer one, Anthony.
Sure. I don't know if I would characterize it as different milestones. I would say it's probably more additional milestones and sort of a second set of hurdles. And so, at least speaking for us, and I think there's probably some commonality, at least with John and maybe some of the others, is we don't ignore the financial side of this, right? I mean, in fact, the more effective we are in making investment decisions, the more return potential we have to execute our mission, double down on it, right? So we take that very seriously. So this is sort of the second layer of the cake that we look at. What was the second? There was another part that was in there.
Lead or...
Oh, lead or follow. Yes.
Yes, sir.
So who's going to do antibiotics? I think that none of you guys would be qualified because you're not going to make a penny out of it. Last time when I was prescribed, it was zero. So you're not going to make any money. So Jim, you're the only one that can actually can do it. But we're going to be in big trouble very soon if we are not already in big trouble.
Yeah, I agree it's a big problem. We don't really do infectious disease though, so we're not really oriented towards shifting our focus that much.
I'm not either. That's nobody's.
Oh, I agree it's a problem, and be happy to brainstorm ways to try to address that that market barrier. There's been attempts to try to improve the economics of vaccines, for example, such as creating a special court to handle liability for vaccine injuries. So there's been interest among policymakers for a while in how to halt the spread of infectious diseases in ways that are not or don't normally seem to be economical for profit-making entities, but there's a lot more work to do, and I don't know any obvious answers.
Can I add one thing to that? So this is the trade-off of focusing, right? Because there are a lot of really important problems in the world, meaningful problems that work on. And the only way that I've been able to sort of find comfort in this is that hopefully there are things that we're exploring that become models that maybe somebody can just plug and play to solve that problem, or maybe they can build on or adapt. But that's, yeah, agree with you. I hope someone does something about that.
And I guess to your point, impact investors are a part of the ecosystem, and the point you raise is certainly valid. I think there is the greater ecosystem that we have to think about here in terms of brainstorming a way to be able to encourage people to develop antibiotics. And I even go beyond antibiotics. I think increasingly there's science even in the microbiome where you might be able to interfere with the progress of an infectious agent through some rather unobvious ways. So I think some new companies that are actually looking at exploring ways to be able to manipulate the microbiome to actually deal with disease could also be a fascinating one. But we are one part of that ecosystem. And I do think the NIH has, the government, the NIH has a role here. I think, philanthropies clearly have a role here. I do think impact investors do, as does the venture community. But, ultimately it also has to be the pharmaceutical company and the biotech companies as well. So it's part of that ecosystem. And I think there could be some hope, I think, in the microbiome side, but I do think probably the NIH would be a great place to start. The NIAID, and Jim, you probably know that better than I know. I don't know if they have any initiatives in this area or not. They probably do some more.
They don't know.
Okay.
The last company went bankrupt just recently. They had a drug that went through phase 3. They put in $1 billion in this, and it went bankrupt because you take it for what, a week, and you're done. You don't have anything, so nobody can make money. You're done. So good luck with us with vancomycin as the last drug. So
Any other?
Anyway.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions from the audience? Well, there's one in the back.
I'm just curious about the interest level in therapeutics for mental disorders such as anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, and addiction, all those things. Sort of behavioral,
Absolutely, that's a big focus for us. It's a situation where the treatments that are delivered now, whether it be pharmaceutical or behavioral, have been stuck in what's been done for the last 2, 3, 4 decades. There's been very little innovation in those areas, and it's desperately needed. There's a lot of problems with. There's some efficacy with what's available right now, but there's a lot of different room for improvement. Just to give one quick example, for depression, it often takes 4 to even 8 weeks before the medication starts working, and that's if it works. A lot of times they have to try different trials. So there's a lot of room for innovation with that, whether it be precision medicine to match up with better treatments, whether it be within the space, within the neurosciences. There really is on the cusp of a paradigm shift in a lot of these areas, leveraging AI that we've seen very directly in very specific ways how it's being utilized and deployed. And I think there's many other examples where some of the innovations are really ripe now for leverage within this area. We anticipate a lot of new developments in the next 5 to 10 years, much better treatments.
And adding to that, I think also better diagnostics and measures of performance, because as we all know, in many of those diseases, there's a very high placebo response rate. So being able to kind of elucidate what particular therapy is conferring the benefit as opposed to the placebo is extremely important. And I know Mike and we are also looking at that area as well, trying to get better measures of performance, what truly is drug-driven as opposed to placebo. So biomarkers are important. Any other questions for the panel? Yes, sir.
I'm curious how the panelists view the SBIR program, particularly at the NIH. That's a kind of an open-ended source of innovation. In other words, it's entrepreneur-driven. And how do you find that works? Because it always has to be renewed at the congressional level to stay alive. And B, do you see any foundations who have adopted a similar or even an add-on approach successfully?
So I love it. A lot of the companies that we generated through Breakout Labs have benefited from SBIRs. So I'm glad it exists. But I would say, in my experience, it's good to have government money, but government agencies are not always the best investors because they're not as good at thinking about the long-term sustainability of companies as for-profit investors are.
Other people's money's great, that's a good call for it. Yeah, I mean, we've benefited from some of that, seen other, some of the companies that we're working with now are preparing to see some of that grant funding, so I think it's fantastic. Though I've also seen a lot of it maybe not utilized to its maximum extent, basically, extending what are essentially academic projects that really aren't driving into commercialization.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? If not, we want to thank you for your participation and attendance. If you want to talk to us later, we'll all be here for a little bit. Thank you very much.